First story. I am a 20-year-old man who works nights in Northern Europe as a mobile security guard. Patrolling preset areas and responding to alarm activations from different customers, including individual homes, cottages, and business buildings, are the duties of my employment. I got an alarm one night at 1 in the morning from a nearby city that was around 25 kilometers distant. The alert in question came from a home in the middle of a forest. When I got there, I saw that there were no lights in the area, so I had to use my almost empty corporate flashlight. It was my only source of light, though it was dim. I looked carefully around the home as soon as I got out of the automobile. At that moment, I observed an open door facing the dark forest in the back. Taking the torch in one hand and my pepper spray in the other, I went into the house to look into the possibility of a break-in. After looking into the basement that was connected to the entrance, I didn't see anything odd. On the other hand, the business that forwarded the alarm to me called. An active alarm had gone off after I arrived, so they asked if I had opened any other doors. I assured them I could not have set off the alarm and denied having opened any more doors. They gave me the order to look into every door and the entire premises. I agreed, despite my reservations, and we concluded the call. I was uneasy about this situation because I knew I hadn't let any doors open. It indicated that someone else had opened a door inside the house because the alarm went off after I had entered. I went over each room extremely carefully and saw nothing unusual. There were no other open doors. I turned to face the entry door again and saw tracks on the ground. My shoes were bigger, so I knew they weren't mine. My fear increased upon realizing that there might be someone hidden within the house. I searched the property again and saw no evidence of intruders. To be sure everything was under control, I locked up, armed the system, secured the alarms, and went back to my car. When I called the firm, they informed me that nothing was wrong and that no more alarms had gone off. After informing the search and rescue personnel about the situation, I left. Maybe you're not scared of stories like this, but when I was all alone in the dark, way out in the woods with only a barely working flashlight, looking into an open door alarm while another door kept opening and closing in front of me and seeing footprints I didn't know were there, I was really scared. This night's events felt different, even though I work in a field where the majority of alarms are false alarms brought on by backyard animals setting off motion sensors. I felt quite strongly that this was not a false alarm. If I had to guess, I'd say that someone entered through the back door because it was left open. I am not sure if their motives were malevolent or not. It's likely that as I moved upstairs, they took refuge in a closet or somewhere else and left through the basement door. This would account for the footprints showing up after I had already thoroughly explored the area. Whatever the case, I am happy that nothing dangerous happened that evening. Even if it wasn't malicious, I have experienced similar things in the past, but none of them involved doors setting off alarms that I hadn't intentionally set up. I tell you this story to warn you, if you want to work in this profession, to be really careful, especially if you work alone. Story 2. Greetings, I'm Trevor, a first responder of 23 years old. Over the past 5 years, I have worked as a fireman and medic and have seen a variety of occurrences. I also work as a side employee for a private ambulance business. For those who don't know, this business moves patients from hospitals to other healthcare facilities or to their residences. We got a call one night while working to transport a hospital patient who was being released. The reason for the admission of this specific patient, a 70-year-old woman with a history of mental health problems, was her unusual behavior. She had remained docile and quiet during her stay, according to the nurses. The patient smiled and introduced herself back to us when we introduced ourselves. She looked regular and friendly at first, even though she was exhausted. Aside from that strange smell, everything seemed normal. We had a little talk about how life was going after finishing the required paperwork, as the transport only took 10 minutes. We drove her to her group home safely, escorted her inside, and gave the caregivers a thorough report. From the corner of my eye, I saw that the woman was staring at me very intently. I didn't really think much of it at first, but then she started pacing back and forth while keeping steady eye contact. She moved quickly, even for her age, and this made me uncomfortable. I would occasionally glance at her to make sure she was still staring at me. Because the caregiver was young and attractive, my boyfriend was absorbed in discussion with her in the meantime. My spouse was preoccupied, but I was getting more and more nervous about the strange things the old lady was doing. The woman eventually noticed me staring at her and stopped abruptly. Oddly, I felt a shiver run down my spine despite the intense heat outdoors and the lack of air conditioning. She stared at him for what felt like an age before running into her room. My spouse encouraged me to see how she was doing after observing this. I reluctantly followed my companion inside, where the sole light coming from the corridor illuminated a pitch-black room. The woman was sitting cross-legged in the middle of her room, her back to us, as we walked in. What happened after we addressed her by name will always be etched in my mind. She slowly turned her head to face us, maintaining the same intense gaze. Her complexion had become much whiter, her eyes were absolutely black, and her jaw was hanging open. She let out a piercing, insane scream that echoed across the room. We ran into the living room, desperate to talk to the caregiver, but we were overwhelmed with anxiety. Remarkably, she didn't move and seemed unaffected. She answered, "Oh, she does that a lot. Can you please take her back to the hospital?" When we asked her about the event. At first, we had firmly refused, but later, the woman came out of her room complaining of neck discomfort. We were unable to refuse her treatment in accordance with our protocols. We reluctantly got ready to bring her back, but not before noticing her unnerving eyes on me. I forced myself not to cry and to look away, but sadly, I looked up and saw her grinning right at me. She said, "I really hate that place," with chills, and turned away without saying anything else. She walked out the door, murmuring, "See you in your nightmares," and giggling, but never breaking eye contact. We took her to her room and gave the nurse a report. She was not incorrect. I've had a lot of nightmares featuring her ever since. I sincerely hope she gets the assistance she so urgently needs, but I also hope we never see each other again. Story 3. I am employed for a reputable chain in the hospitality sector in the United Kingdom. I can honestly claim that this is the best job I've ever had, albeit I won't reveal the name. I didn't think I would like it as much at first, especially with the night shifts. Everything seemed great throughout the interview until they revealed that I would be working alone. I was so nervous about it that I nearly turned down the position, but taking the job proved to be the wisest choice I've ever made. Even after working there for almost 2 years, I still find it hard to comprehend how lucky I am. Overall, I'm quite delighted. The service is excellent and the visitors are generally polite. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages to each employment. I've had to deal with challenging visitors, those who returned intoxicated from a night out, and I've even had to kick out a couple because their rowdy conduct kept others from sleeping. That being said, even though it's not flawless all the time, I still appreciate what I do. But one night made me start to doubt everything. There were a couple weeks ago when this happened. I showed there at my regular hour to relieve the evening staff. I was taken aside by the duty manager, who gave me an update on the events that transpired during dinner service. She claimed that there were 2 visitors, a man and a woman, who behaved somewhat strangely while sharing a room. They appeared to have gone outside for a smoke, but the man began to annoy the diners by smashing himself against the windows and making crude gestures and swearing. After vanishing for a short while, he reappeared carrying a fire extinguisher he had discovered in the trash can. The duty manager stepped in and gave a warning, making it obvious that more disturbances or damage to the property would result in eviction. After making hollow threats in return, the man with his partner withdrew to their room. The duty manager gave me the assurance that everything would be all right, and that it was very unlikely that they would leave their room again that evening. Her assumption, though, couldn't have been more incorrect. Around 11:15 p.m., the front of house employees and duty manager departed. so I locked up the doors and got my panic button, a safety measure our manager demanded we use. Even though I had never used it before, I was happy to have it that evening. I concentrated on my chores, which included cleaning up, putting together the continental breakfast, emptying trash bags, counting money, replenishing juice supplies, and making muffins, crumpets, and these were mundane yet essential tasks. I was going to take a quick break from mopping around 1:30 a.m., munching some snacks and browsing through my phone in the restaurant area when I heard the hotel door open. It was the couple from the first room coming out for a smoke. I didn't feel comfortable being alone myself in the open space because of the man's past actions. I hurriedly packed up my things and made my way to the office so I could lock myself in and keep an eye on their whereabouts using the CCTV. After a while, the woman reappeared in the room, clearly ill. She staggered along, pausing every so often as though in agony. I watched through the monitors as she made it back to her room. But the man didn't seem to be in a rush to go with her. Rather, he made the decision to investigate the dining area. I nearly opened the door to let him know I was there at first, thinking he could be looking for me. However, as I quickly peered at the monitor, I discovered something strange. He started dancing while perched atop a table. Though it didn't sound menacing, the conduct was definitely odd. So instead of answering the door, I just kept staring at him. His conduct changed over the course of the following hour or two, going from unusual to downright unsettling. From dancing on the table, he moved on to exploring the entire space. He eventually arrived in the foyer, where he was motionless as a statue. He shifted positions after a little while, only to freeze once more. I thought it strange at first, even laughing at his strange behavior. Still, the worst was not over yet. By 2:45 a.m., the man was still acting strangely. He would come and go from the hotel, bouncing and dancing. Subsequently, he thought it would be a smart idea to grab the condiment tray, settle into the chair behind the desk, and begin consuming brown sauce and ketchup. His behavior had now changed from odd to alarming. I was afraid to confront him and tell him to stop, so I didn't dare open the office door. I didn't want to put myself in danger as the only female worker. I kept observing him. His actions grew more and more disgusting with time. He finished the condiments around 3:25 a.m., took off his shirt, and whipped the saucy from his mouth. His shirt was thrown carelessly into the desk chair, and he wandered around aimlessly for a while before he abruptly stopped and looked in the direction of the office door. I was overcome with fear at that time. He made his way carefully to the door while looking straight into the camera as though he knew I was observing. He leaned up close to the office door, gave it a seductive kiss while keeping his eyes on the camera, and then started acting in a sexually suggestive manner. It sickened me to watch this. Shock gripped my body, but I knew I had to move fast. I made sure the man outside the door couldn't hear me while I hit my panic button and dialed the cops. I spoke quietly as I conveyed the issue to the police dispatcher over the phone, since break-fast service was about to start, and I didn't want any other guests to be in danger. I frantically asked for their help. Feeling safer now that assistance was on its way, I left the office and told one of the police everything I had given the dispatcher. The man stayed in the lobby, still on his knees, yelling, "Not me, not me." The police asked to enter the man's room to see how the woman was doing, but there was a language barrier, possibly due to his intoxication, and he kept saying, "Not me." We opened the door to an overpowering stink of excrement and sewage. There were hard drugs on the bedroom desk and beer bottles all over the place. Urine and booze had saturated the nude woman as she lay on the bed. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. The individual was carried away and arrested following a great deal of commotion and the arrival of more police officers in a riot van. About 6:15 a.m., a relative showed up to retrieve the female. They expressed their sincere regret and disclosed that both people had mental health problems and had been absent for several days. I wanted them gone, but I was trying to be understanding after what I had seen. The pair was taken by the police, who left around 6:45 a.m. When the day manager showed in, I showed them the CCTV tape and went over the entire situation with them. They gave me hugs and told me how well I handled the circumstance. I just wanted to go home, get into bed, and take a long shower. I was really worn out. A few weeks have passed after the event, and I have now discovered that the man faces charges related to indecent exposure. The woman is staying with a relative, and my sincere prayer is that they both get the much-needed assistance. Personally, I'm still employed at the same location. I'm not going to allow one significant incident overshadow how much I love my work. But it did teach me a valuable lesson. You should always follow your gut. What may have happened to me if I hadn't fled to the workplace at that moment?